everyone. It's 2 o'clock. I think we will start. So welcome to the Cabinet Committee for Improvement. We have a number of people online, but also a number in the room here. So we'll see how we go. We've got apologies for absence. We've got apologies from County Councillor Ali, and I've got a notification that County Councillor Beavers will be substituting, but we don't know where she is at the moment, so we'll see what happens. Okay, which gets us on to agenda item 2, the Constitution, membership terms of reference and the programme of meetings. Anybody, Donna, do you want to say anything on that?
No, just to note that we have a full suite of meetings planned, that those meetings will be taking place. And on page 3, we have the terms of reference.
Yeah, thank you. Got a seconder? Thanks very much. Okay. Item 3, disclosure of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Has anybody got any interest that they want to declare? No? Thank you. Item 4 is the minutes from the last meeting, which was on the 20th of April. Do I have anyone to move those minutes? Thank you, Councillor Turner, and Councillor Buckley to second. Thank you. And item 5 is the corporate strategy monitoring report for Q4. I'm going to ask Donna to go through that in a few seconds. Just to say that it is focused on Q4. It isn't a full year report because obviously some of that information isn't available. And what I propose is Debbie talks us. Donna talks us through the report, perhaps section by section, and then I'll invite any officers and then cabinet members to make any comments they want to make, and then we'll open it up for questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. As you'll see, the report itself, the covering report, just explains that it is Q4, as mentioned by County Councillor Williamson, and we have a breakdown of highlights and minor issues really in the actual report, covering report. So I won't go through those line by line because all of the detail will be picked up in the actual Appendix A. So I propose to start on page 13 of the pack, which is Lancashire will be the place to live. And if possible, I would like to invite John Davis to take us through the first half of that report, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. We're looking at the highway defects KPI, and I suppose it's important to say there's always a focus on this, that it's potholes. It encompasses more than potholes. This does look at other safety defects such as trips on footways, things like that. It's broken down, the table, if you can see the table, it's broken down into different sections. So we have different time periods by which we are monitored. So initially we've got the 4-hour emergency. These are defects that we would class as an immediate danger to the public. So it could be something like a manhole cover has gone missing. So there's a potential danger for a car disappearing down it, or a cyclist, something like that. So they are classed as emergency, and we look to repair those in 4 hours. In terms of the performance on those, for Q4, we're at 90%, and the target is 95%. I suppose it's important to understand that these are relatively low numbers. So if we put that into context, we will have completed 47 out of 52 defects that were reported as emergency. So whilst we're still short of the target, and we always aim to hit that target, some of the numbers are quite low. So any small changes can make a big difference percentage wise. Again, in the 2 working days, now these are things that are they're urgent, they're an immediate danger. They're not, they're imminent danger, sorry, not immediate danger. So they are, it is urgent that we do get these repaired. With both these categories, the first 2 categories, you'll find that most of these are reported to us by the public. We have our own highway safety inspectors, but for these 2 categories, most of the reports come through the public. It's public reporting. Again, we're missing that. We're at 84% on that. Numbers wise, if we're putting it into context, then we're looking at for the 2 day, it's 581 out of 688. So we are doing a high number of these repairs. I think it's important to understand that. When we move to the 5, 10 and 20 day categories, these are slightly different in that most of these are picked up by our own highway safety inspectors who are patrolling the streets all the time. And I think what you will see with those is it depends to some degree on the category of the road as to how they're categorised. If it's on, say, a strategic route, a motorway or an A-class road, trunk road, you may find it's classed as a 5-day repair. If you move down a category of road, that may move to a 10 till you get to the residential type roads, where it would then move to a 20 because the low traffic, the low pedestrian use, so they're not quite as urgent. Again, in terms of numbers for all those categories, we've completed 14,500 out of 19,200. So it's a substantial number of repairs that we have completed. And whilst, again, we haven't achieved the targets, we're at 75%, there are mitigating factors, I think, to take into account. Certainly this particular winter, we've obviously, had the pandemic, which has had an impact at times on staff numbers, with people being off or isolating. But one of the biggest things is actually been the weather. It's what we would class as a perfect storm, really, this season. We've been gritting far more than we did last year. There's been an awful lot of days and nights where we've been out gritting. So that impacts on the ability of the teams the following day to be out repairing potholes. We also have situations where we can't repair them because of the weather. We physically can't do it because of the weather. If there's snow there, there's flooded, if there's water from heavy rain, we just can't physically do them. So that limits our ability to address some of these. So we had a combination this season, winter season, where we were doing a lot of gritting, and when it wasn't gritting, we had the Storm Christoph in February, which created more potholes. I suppose if we look at, again, in context, before Christmas, sort of October, November, our daily number of defects was about 1,500. During the winter period, that went up to 4,700 a day. So it's a significant increase. So what you're finding is the weather is creating the potholes, but we haven't got the resources. And whilst we do use contractors to supplement our own resource, they were also struggling to provide resource to help us out. So in essence, that's the reasons for where we are in terms of performance. Going forward, what we have done, we've just set up a new contract from April, which will give us the ability to call on more contract resource should we need it going forward. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, John. That contextual information was really actually very, very helpful. I hadn't realised personally myself the numbers, particularly that differential when the weather comes. That's helpful. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Leader. And just to follow on really from John's points, I'd just like to bring a few things to your attention, to the committee's attention, really. Glad that John's mentioned the new partners that we're going to have on board to kind of increase our ability to kind of fill the gap when required. I think that's going to be a major boost to us next year. However, we do need to brace ourselves for the fact that this is obviously going to be an annual event, to have a red quarter and then 2 nice juicy green summer quarters of really good performance. And it's great testament to the teams that we did manage to do 14,500 highways defects repairs in the cold and rain and miserable Morecambe winter that we had. So I think we do need to put that into context about the winter reds, and we're looking as leadership, as a political leadership within the highways team, myself and my lead member, we're looking at what kind of innovations we can bring to winter-based highways repair services. We want to try and bring some innovative solutions to try and, at the moment, the market is a little bit, some of the ideas are a bit expensive, and so we're just looking at things that we can bring into the ways in which we work that are hopefully going to be innovative and stop the reds, more green.
Okay. Anyone got any questions or points that they want to make? Okay. Thank you, John. I'll pass back to Donna to take us.
John, are you okay to pick up on the street lighting fault repair as well? Okay.
Fix. The second, where we're slightly out of target, is where we require traffic management to be able to do that type of work. But I think we were probably only 3 faults repaired out of time in that category. So generally we're doing pretty well on the street lighting. The performance has improved as the year's gone on. So I'm hoping that we will get those fully into green.
Sounds positive. Anyone got anything they want to say? No? Okay. So we move on to the next bit. There's a little bit at the end of page 14 about recycling. I don't know who's doing that.
It's the fundamental bit about recycling is that the household doorstep waste has gone up as the business waste has gone down, and generally the recycling rate is comparable to last year's outturn considering the pandemic. There is a bit more detail in the text, but I won't read it out unless anyone's got any questions. Okay.
Yep. Anyone got anything they want to raise on that? No. Here. Okay, so now we move on to page 15. Donna, talk us through that.
Yes, okay. So the first performance indicator is looking at the children and families wellbeing service, and this service has constantly adapted its delivery to meet the needs of the families, taking into consideration the varying government guidance over the quarter. So it's offered a range of virtual service delivery and increasing face-to-face support. So this actual increase in face-to-face support has enabled positive outcomes for families who wouldn't otherwise have perhaps benefited because they prefer that face-to-face intervention. We've also had a reduction in families withdrawing and disengaging with support during the quarter, and we have a trend of fewer cases being referred to social care. Can I just also add here that we don't have a representative from Children's Services here today because of the Ofsted inspection visit that's due next week, and there's a lot of work going on. We're happy to take away any questions and getting responses for you.
Thanks, Donna. Yeah. Anybody want to make any? Yeah, Councillor Townley.
Thank you, Leader. I'm really to say that our officers have done the most magnificent job in very difficult circumstances, and although we are now gearing up to pick up the pieces of the pandemic, which will obviously be with us for many, many years, we are fully prepared, with our innovative strategies. When I say fully prepared, I mean fully prepared to throw ourselves wholeheartedly into this work. And we are a highly innovative team, and we have come up with some highly innovative strategies and other working practices. And on that, I will just thank the team again.
Thank you. Okay, so if we move on to page 16, no one else has got any points. Sorry, was I missing? Did I miss? Thought your hand was up. Okay, page 16, which talks about some of the education outcomes.
The education outcomes haven't actually changed from the previous report because we haven't had any more figures released. So I'm not proposing to go through them unless someone has any questions in relation to. All I can do is read what's on the page. So
I assume everyone's read it. Does anybody want to make any comments?
Wrong button. Just to thank all the staff working in education for all their efforts. It's been a very difficult year with teachers having to do assessments rather than exams. Very difficult year for our young people. So it's really pleasing to see that their efforts have held up so well. So.
Councillor B.
Yeah, thank you. I was just looking at this and it's saying that the percentage of children looked after who are living in Lancashire is at 80%. So there's 20% still living outside of Lancashire. I know that was an aim of the last administration to get that down. What's happening with that, the answer?
That falls to me, Councillor Beavis, and I will get back to you. It is something that has been worked on, but I don't have the figures to date with you. Things have changed as they are constantly changing in children looked after. So I shall get back to you on that. Thanks.
Thanks. Any more points? No? Okay. Moving on.
Okay, the next indicator, we're on page 17 now, is the percentage of health checks undertaken. Now, this is where the GP practices are commissioned to undertake health checks. As you can imagine, this has actually been paused due to the pandemic. So we haven't got any figures to give you at the moment. Unless anybody knows anything different.
Councillor Green.
No, it is. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, for the reason that Donna has set out, obviously it's been impossible to carry out the health checks over the last 15 months or so. But I have to say the figures prior to the pandemic were not what I'd like them to be. So I think it's something that we need to keep a watch on moving forwards, and we need to see some significant improvements. Obviously, it will take some time to recover from the pandemic and to return to some level of normality in terms of people being able to visit GP surgeries, etc. So there will be some lag on this, but moving forwards, we want to see those figures increasing over time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we'd all support that. We know how essential it is, that early intervention. Councillor Turner.
Yeah, and just to add to what Michael said there, prior to this, the figures were always, like Charlie described, a nice juicy green before. So I'm sure when things permit, we'll be able to return back to that.
Thank you. Donna, are we moving on to page 18?
Yes, that's right. And I'd like to ask Tony Pounder to pick this up, please.
Okay, sorry, I've not used these mics before. Okay, yes, there's three indicators here. So in terms of safeguarding, you'll see we're still just a little short of the target, but we've been making progress during the year. It does say in the commentary here that we can see no particular differences as a result of obviously the pandemic on the impact on individual circumstances. But one of the things I think Councillor Gooch should be aware of is before the pandemic arrived on the scene, there was considerable plans laid to transform our safeguarding services, our safeguarding adult service, which then had to be delayed for much of the last year. And I think it's much more recently that that has been reinvigorated and starting to finalise the shape of that. So I think the numbers are what they are. As it says also in the subtext, we are seeing 96% of people reporting they are fully or partially satisfied. And it is a self-reporting metric, and I guess it is in the eye of everyone who's on the receiving end of our intervention to determine whether they feel fully or partially satisfied. And for some, their partial satisfaction may be a feeling that the main things have been dealt with, but something that may have been outside of our control, or indeed anyone's control, may not have been addressed. You know, whether somebody is still living near to them or loves them or cares for them or what have you. So it's a very difficult and subjective decision, judgment that individuals reach in each and every circumstance. But absolutely right, that as a benchmarking measure, we see if we are considerably out of line with the rest of the country, and we're not. We want to get better, and we will, I think. But that's where I would leave that one. As far as the two issues around CQC provision, I think people will probably be aware that as a result of the pandemic, many inspections into care services have been postponed for much of the year. It's not prevented ourselves at times having to intervene and get involved in services which have been failing and are struggling, but CQC themselves haven't been working through their normal range of inspections. So changes, whether good, or bad, or just a continuation, have not been reported on any considerable scale. So these numbers were unlikely to move upwards or downwards significantly, regardless of what has actually been going on in the services. But just to absolutely underline that, you know, our services, which again, Councillor Gooch will be very familiar with, we are regularly briefing him when something isn't quite right or sometimes badly going wrong. And we work very closely in those situations with CQC to address it. But the wider strategic challenge across all these services is obviously a major one as we hopefully start to see some easing of the pandemic and its impact on the social care sector.
Okay, anybody want to make any points? Ask any questions? No? Okay, well, we will note the report, and thank you very much, Tony, for your comments there. Which then gets us on to page 20, which is Lancashire will be a place to work.
Yes, thank you. We have a number of indicators here relating to library services. When we were compiling the report, we argued with ourselves about whether to put the reds in the red because it was so obvious why they were red, because the libraries had been closed for most of the year with the pandemic. So, but we decided it was the right thing to do because it does draw attention to the impact of the pandemic on people's ability to use the library services. Having said that, this is potentially quite a good news story, so I will go into the narrative shortly, but I just wanted to draw your attention to the number of e-downloads, which is the green indicator. You'll see the target for 2021 was to 293,000, and actually that was almost achieved in one single quarter, such is the demand for e-downloads now, with a cumulative figure of 930,000, more than 930,000 in the year. So that has really shifted this year. So looking at the narrative, which is on page 21, we've got a good description here of the way that libraries have adapted to deliver the best service possible in the pandemic. They've kept lockdown services such as being able to return items and click and collect. They've kept the people's network sessions open as much as possible, even though sometimes it was only users with pre-booked essential computer sessions being permitted. And those essential sessions are for people who are wanting to view a funeral, for example, or apply for a job or that kind of thing. So they've managed to keep those open. They've run a range of library events online with 1,700 individuals attending virtually. There've been chat groups, family book events, podcasts, reading friends sessions, author interviews, absolutely all sorts that's been delivered online. And the volunteer service has also continued to operate. So I think library services have certainly done the best in the circumstances.
I think we'd all agree with that. It's innovation personified, but I'll ask Councillor Buckley to speak on that.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Thank you for that, Donna. I'm particularly pleased to actually look at the one green line on the chart there, but more importantly, the way that each quarter has increased in number. I know when the first lockdown came and we were promoting the e-downloads and all the e-services, if you like. I think I was a little bit concerned that might have just been a blip, and then it sort of plateaued. So I'm particularly pleased that there's a cumulative a growth on that, and that's something really to be congratulated to the team in promoting that. There's a couple of sentences I just want to bring out actually in the text, and that's at the top of page 21. It's just one line where you say, lockdown 3 then began on 6th of January, but this time libraries were able to continue with their restricted services. That is one sort of line, but I know that we've got 63 libraries that were open across the county. That gave our residents real reassurance, because they knew that there was a very safe environment that they could go, and that really helped people out in the communities. So I think there's an awful lot to be said behind that one line. And the other sort of bit I'd like to just bring out is the volunteer section that you've got at the bottom there, especially the home library service and the befriending service. I mean, that really escalated during the lockdown, where people were phoning vulnerable people and acted as a befriending service. And with the home and the mobile library drivers being involved, there was a real sort of sense of helping the vulnerable out in the community. So I just want to pay tribute to all the volunteers who were involved in that. So thank you.
Thank you, and I think we'd all endorse that and recognise the role of the libraries actually as a sort of focal point in the community. For those of us who are lucky enough to have them in our areas, and it's great. They're a hub for support, friendship, and books and everything else as well. So it's great stuff. So well done to them. So we move on to page 22, which is all about employment and education and training.
Okay, thank you. So this again, there's been an awful lot of hard work here. There's been excellent engagement seen from secondary schools and post-16 providers, which has given us a sustained improvement in performance. As mentioned previously, it's been an extremely challenging set of circumstances with the education sector. So I'm not going to read all of the figures out. You can see here that there's a lot of detailed information here. But the upshot of which is that we've got an improved position with more 16 and 17-year-olds in education, employment and training. We have fewer not known individuals. So the flip of it is the not in education, employment and training. And what the aim is to reduce the number of people that are not known to us, and then we can work on positive outcomes for those people. And that has been a huge piece of work that's been undertaken. There's no resting with this one. There's a range of actions continuing to be undertaken by a dedicated team to improve the NEET position and the not known position. And they're also focusing on vulnerable groups, working very well across with other teams internally and looking at how we can share data and get a better understanding. But in particular, we need to do some further work in relation to track young people for whom we have no contact details. I'm happy to take any questions away. Response if need be.
Anybody got any points that they want to raise? Councillor Rea?
Not a point really, but just to echo that everything you said, that the success that was maintained during very difficult circumstances is to be
Thank you. Yes, I'd agree with that, and I know from the past a huge amount of effort that's gone into it, but there is still a lot to do. Actually working at an individual level with all those young people, so that we give them the best opportunities available. So great stuff. Thank you. So page 23.
Yes, I'm going to ask Tony to come back in here, please.
Thank you, Donna. Well, as you can all see, this is read right across the board, and I'm pretty confident pre-COVID that we would have been much closer and quite likely have exceeded that target, because there was a determination from leadership and additional capacity gathered together within that service. But of course, when that came along, we had to make 3 or 4 decisions about resources and priorities and various things. And so the team that would have been spending their time on doing this work were redeployed, and to a great extent they've still been working on that right through most of the year. Senior management have obviously been focused elsewhere, including myself and my colleague Ian Crabtree on COVID related activity. And of course, the economy itself has been a struggle for people seeking employment. And it's a bit of a generalisation, but it'd be true to say that many individuals with learning disability, it's areas such as hospitality and leisure where often employers will seek to provide inclusive environments for people to work. And of course, that many of those have been struggling to stay open to any extent at all. And finally, there's obviously been a lot of concern about the vulnerability of some. Not all individuals with learning disability, but many do have vulnerabilities relating to COVID, which has meant, for example, we've had the day services closed for a larger part of the year because of general restrictions. And so I'm sure families would also have not been enthusiastic. So you'll see all of that is true. Also, the number of referrals, requests for seeking employment has been dramatically lower than it would have been even compared to the year before. So I'm confident by the end of this year we will be in a different place, as long as the pandemic is better under control and we start to see the economy appear. And of course, one of the great opportunities, if I can frame it like that, of the current state of the economy is the labour market is very tight, and I think people do need staff. I see job adverts across the whole everywhere I visit for all kinds of manner of opportunities. So I think that does provide an opportunity if we can just get in there.
Thank you. Anybody? Councillor Gooch.
Got it. Yes. Yes, I agree with everything that Tony has said. It does look as though we're not very good at this. But if you look at figures instead of percentages, we have actually got 71 of those people are in work, which means we need to get another 37 in work, which isn't a big number, in order to meet our target. So I think that's quite useful to remember. The other thing is difficult to get a handle on this in many respects, because the figures here only relate to people we know, people who are on our books. We don't know how many people with learning difficulties there are in the community who don't have a service from us. And whether they're working or not is something we just don't know. So we'll certainly be working on it, and we'll be looking around for saying, you know, who can provide more employment.
Thank you. Anybody got else any other points to make? No, that contextual information was really helpful, actually. I hadn't realised that the numbers were as they. Thank you. So if we move on to page 25, which we sort of go on to sort of economic development type issues. So Donna, do you want to talk us through?
Yes, we're on page 24 actually. Lancashire will be the place to prosper. That's fine. And this is new to me, bringing Andy in to lead the discussion on that page. So.
Thanks, Donna, and thank you, Chair. You've got 3 indicators here that cover 2 specific areas of work. Firstly, Rosebud, the County Council's loan scheme, which has been operational for 30 years, run through Lancashire County Developments Limited. You'll see performance has been poor. Whilst we sustained performance in Q1, it's become increasingly difficult to make loans through the Rosebud Fund. That's partly a tribute to the to government's response to COVID in terms of the amount of bounce back loans and coronavirus business interruption loans, so-called CBILS, and now recovery loans, which have been pumped into the economy. That's had two impacts on Rosebud. Firstly, it's meant that people can borrow cheaply, more cheaply in other places. And secondly, people have used things like bounce back loans, which have particularly preferential repayment terms, to repay off other debt in the companies. So our portfolio has shrunk and the amount of deals that we are doing has shrunk. And I think we just have to take that on the chin for the moment until there is a market out there for debt finance. What we are trying to do is control the costs of that programme by renegotiating the management fee with the company who run and develop the loan pipeline for us and manage the portfolio of existing loans, both of which have diminished. The second two indicators in the table relate to the operation of Boost, Lancashire's business growth hub. Despite the red, Boost has been obviously very busy through the COVID pandemic, but the nature of the calls and the nature of the work we're doing with the business community has changed fundamentally. We're not predominantly looking at businesses who were growing through that period. They were in survival mode, and we were assisting people to navigate the national and local business support offer for businesses. That's resulted in the number of jobs that are being created in businesses assisted by Boost falling. And it's also impacted the rate at which new businesses are being established. Although it doesn't yet show in the performance, it is noticeable now, both through our own advisors and those we contract, that we are seeing people returning to both of those services, and we are seeing people, as has already been said, keen to take on new employees and return their staff from furlough. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Has anyone got any? Oh, Councillor Riggett.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to add a couple of bits to what Andy has just said. I mean, first of all, I think we should acknowledge and thank Andy and his team, because I know the Boost and business support team have been phenomenal. Straight away, as soon as they started to see the impact of COVID on the economy, they changed the services. They quickly reacted. You know, you don't. If you speak to anybody in our Boost or business support team, their passion for Lancashire business, you know, you come straight to it. You know, it doesn't need any selling. They really have been. They've worked really hard with that. And I think what Andy also says about the government support, while it's not hit every sector the way every sector would like to be supported, the amount of money they've pumped into Lancashire and to keep its businesses at least in a position where they can move forward as we come out has been really helpful. And I know Andy also touched on the Boost scheme, which, going back to LCDL and having served on LCDL, I know how rigorous and determined that will be under County Council Ashton to move forward and make sure that keeps delivering for us. So while we have reds on our figures, I think it's actually about how is business in Lancashire feeling? Is it in a strong place to move forward? Are we ready to support? And I think we are. So that's all I wanted to add, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to make any points? No? That's great. I think we'd all support that. We just need everyone to be ready to pick up the reins now. Donna, do you want to take us on from that?
Thank you, Chair. Moving on, you'll see that a number of performance indicators are actually, where it says current performance, we have annual report scheduled to be confirmed. That is the case for sustainable transport and travel and visitors to Lancashire, which are on pages 25 and 26. We are working to produce a schedule so that the reports can come back to this meeting. I think also there's the improving our population's health and well-being, which is certainly a key report that needs to come here. I think the Director of Public Health is keen to do that as soon as so we'll be seeing that as soon as possible. So we're back over to Tony again for page 27, percentage of older people still at home 91 days after discharge from hospital, etc.
Okay, well, if I can take the indicators in two groups, really, because most of these are about services for older people, and there's one which is about adults with a learning disability. So if I just deal with the proportion of adults with a learning disability who live in their own home, first off, and then I'll cover the others. I think, as it says in the commentary, we are considerably above the national average and have been for some time. And we have also seen continued improvement over the year. And I guess what this represents is the scale of ambition that I think Lancashire and many of my colleagues who work in those services have always had. Got to say it's part of a culture over a couple of decades, not just here in Lancashire, but across the Northwest. We are, by some way, the region which leads on this issue. And I think Lancashire County Council's been there amongst the best of the North West authorities. So it's been a good place to be. We have a lot of innovation, a lot of work. The council is also helping through some further investment that's occurred over the last 18 months to further develop our opportunities for adults with learning disability to live at home in accommodation which is even more suited to their longer term needs than some of the options they face now. So I think that, you know, we're performing really well. I think it's great that the ambition continues, and wouldn't want that to diminish. But just to acknowledge, although the colour might indicate we've not hit the target, I think any authority in the country would be immensely proud of that that percentage. That's my sense of it. When we look at the other indicators, which are around reablements and periods at home, and the proportion of adults being supported at home, and the issues of permanent admissions into care homes, I would have to say that, and I think I've said this in the previous two cycles of meetings of these have been key priorities at the beginning of the year, but in reality, we haven't been working on these. So they've got better in the residential and nursing home sector, and I don't think I would want to say that's been because of amazing work by us, because that would be on hiding to nothing, because I think the reality is people have been reluctant to go into care homes. They wanted to stay at home. Their families have wanted them to stay at home. And you'll see we've not just hit the target, we've busted it really. We've, you know, it's quite an incredible achievement. And I would love to take full credit for that, and my staff would, but I think we know the reality is that that's not the case. On the other side of the coin, we also know that some of the other arrangements around things like reablement and how those have operated, and the discharge arrangements, they've been turned upside down once or twice over the last year because of COVID and the way hospitals have wanted to deal with it. As you'll see, we're still performing pretty well, but not achieving the ambitious target we had set. And you'll see that the numbers around people who are supporting at home have exceeded the target. But again, that's because people have done everything they can, including our services, including our social work and occupational therapy staff, to keep people at home. So the challenge with, I think, all of those targets is going to be, obviously we've got some new metrics probably for this year, which we will discuss in future meetings, but it's actually how we you know, kind of keep as near to possible to the best of those numbers, and don't just revert back to the position we might have been 18 months ago. But you are likely to see some bounce back, just not if we get things right to the extent that it could do.
Thank you. And Councillor Gooch.
I was hoping Tony was going to take credit for it because it is quite an astonishing figure, but it's circumstances. That's it. Yeah, certainly on enable people with learning difficulties to live in their own homes. We're making strides on that with our new supported living, with actual, you know, apartments with their own front door, so they can live the same as trendy young professionals in Manchester can live, with their own front door, but with supported, and not somewhere stuck on a hill, but as in my friend's division in St Anne's, in the centre of the town, above the shops, so they're part of the community in very high standard living. So I'm glad to see that and be able to report that to you.
Excellent, thank you. Anybody else want to make any comments? No. Okay. Is that, Donna, do you want to take us through the last?
Yes, yep. So the we're now on page 29, and this is the number of working days lost to sickness absence. And there's been an improvement, which so the sickness absence rate has declined continuously and is actually one of the best rates that we've had since we began monitoring in February 2018. So we've got a decline in short-term and long-term absences. And we've also identified a slight decline in the number of days lost due to mental health related absence. I don't think it's written in here, but I do know that the HR teams have been working very, very hard to support managers to manage sickness absence, which is probably reflected in these figures, but also people haven't been going down with colds, etc. So it is one of those interesting facts, I think, that's been a national position. And the other performance indicator is the revenue forecast outturn percentage variance to budget. And it says that, as it says in the text, 2021 was an exceptional year due to the pandemic, with various different grants provided by the government throughout the year. And the main reason for the underspend is due to a continued strong performance across Treasury management with a surplus of £24 million generated.
Anybody want to make any comments? No? I think the only thing I would say that it'll be really interesting to see how those figures change as we move out of lockdown and we start to see people coming back to the workplace and that sort of hybrid working pattern. It'll be interesting, the challenges for managers that come out of that. That's the whole of the report. Anybody got any other points that they want to make? Just say thank you for everyone's contributions to them. Look forward to the overall 2021 report and progress over Q1 at the next meeting. Item 6 on the agenda is urgent business, and we haven't got any of that. And the next meeting will actually be on the 9th of September, and probably hopefully all of us in one room for that meeting. So thank you very much to everyone and for those who've zoomed in as well.